advantage of those low casino edge bets. The only part of Baccarat that gets a little confusing is trying to understand the rules concerning the draw of a third card. But remember, the rules are always the same at every table, and they'll usually have a printed copy of the rules at the table, and will give you a copy if you ask for it. After playing the game for a while, you'll start to remember the rules on your own, but until then, here's a rundown on how it works. As we said before, if the first two cards in either hand total 8 or 9, then the game is over and the highest total wins. If the totals are both 8 or both 9, then it's a tie and neither hand wins. For any other total, the rules have to be consulted, and it's always the player hand that goes first. If the player hand has a total of 6 or 7, it must stand. The only other totals it can possibly have are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and for all of those totals it must draw a card. There, that wasn't too hard, was it? If the player hand has a total of 6 or 7, it stands, and for anything else, it has to draw a card. Well, that was the easy part, because now it gets a little complicated. After the player hand is finished, the banker hand must take its turn, and if its first two cards total 0, 1, or 2, it must draw a card. If its two cards total 7, it must stand. The only other possible totals the bank can have are 3, 4, 5, or 6, and the decision as to whether or not a third card is drawn depends on the third card that was drawn by the player hand. These rules are rather complicated, and we are showing them here on the screen if you want to see what they are for any given situation. There you have it. Those are the rules of Baccarat concerning the draw of a third card. As you saw, they were a little complicated, but remember that you don't have to memorize the rules yourself, because the dealer will know them and play each hand by those rules. But you can always ask for a copy of the rules at the table to follow along. Now let's try some sample hands. The player hand has Queen 9 for a total of 9, and the banker hand has 10-8 for a total of 8. Which hand wins? Both hands are naturals, but the player hand total of 9 is higher than the banker hand total of 8, so the player hand is the winner. If the player hand has Queen 6 for a total of 6, and the banker hand has Ace-Jack, which equals 1, what happens? The player hand must stand on its 6, and the banker hand must always draw when it has a total of 0, 1, or 2. So, if the bank hand draws a 10, then the player hand wins 6-1. What happens when the player hand has 10-5 and the bank hand has 6-10? The player hand must draw, and let's say it gets a 7 for a total of 2. The banker hand has a total of 6, and if it could stand on that total, it would win because its 6 is higher than the 2 held by the player. Of course, if you were betting on banker, that's exactly what you would want to happen. But, unfortunately for you, the rules require the bank hand to draw another card whenever its first two cards total 6, and the third card drawn by the player is a 7. So now, instead of having a winning hand, you have to hope that the card you draw isn't a 4 or 5, which would both make you a loser. You also wouldn't want to draw a 6, because that would give you a total of 2, which would give you a tie. In this case, the bank hand goes on to draw a 4, which gives it a total of 0, and it loses 0-2. All right, now that you know how to play Baccarat, we come to the important question, which is, how do you win? Well, as I said before, if you bet on player, you'll only be giving the casino a 1.24% edge. And if you bet on banker, you'll be giving the casino an even more modest edge of just 1.06%. While both of these are pretty low edges to give the casino, you are still stuck with the fact that the casino will always have an edge over you, and in the long run, the game of Baccarat is unbeatable. So if that's the case, then how do you win? Well, the answer to that is very simple. You have to get lucky. And that's the only way you can win at Baccarat. Of course, this is easier said than done, but fortunately in the game of Baccarat, you have the option of making two bets that require no skill, and both offer the casino a very low edge, especially when you compare them to roulette, where the house has a 5.26 advantage on a double zero wheel, and slot machines, where the edge is about 5% to 15%. I always stress the point that when you gamble in a casino, you have to play the games that have the lowest casino edge in order to have the best chance of winning. And with that in mind, you can see that Baccarat is not that bad a game to play for the recreational gambler. Now let's take a quick look at one of the most common systems for betting on Baccarat. One thing that many Baccarat players seem to have in common is a belief in streaks. And the casinos accommodate these players by providing scorecards at the table that can be used to track the results of each hand. Many players like to bet on whatever won the last hand in the belief that it will continue to come in, and they hope for a long streak. The thinking for these players is that since Baccarat is purely a guessing game, it's just like guessing the outcome of a coin toss. And chances are that a coin won't alternately come up heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, but rather that there will be streaks where the same result will come in for a while. So, is this a good system? Well, actually, it's no better and no worse than any other system, because no matter what you do, you'll still have the same casino edge going against you on every bet you make. 1.24% on the player and 1.06% on the banker. The one good thing about a system like this, though, is that you don't have to sit there and guess what you want to play each time. Instead, you go into the game knowing how you're going to play, and you don't have to blame yourself if your guess is wrong. Instead, you get to blame it on your system. That's all you need to know about how to play and how to win at Baccarat. Thanks for watching, and best wishes for good luck in the casino. Don't forget that you can see more of our educational gambling videos on our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/AmericanCasinoGuide.